Welcome back to America's Fractured Politics. Today I'm happy to have with me Brian Tanguay. Brian is a longtime Substacker in addition to being a blogger at Shouts from the Balcony and founder and editor at California Review of Books. Brian writes some of the most prescient literate work on Substack, and he is a must-read for me. Welcome, Brian. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I'm glad you're here. Let's start with the shutdown. How do you think this ends?
It's a great question, and I was reading something the other day by one of the New Republic's contributing editors, Meredith Shiner, and she wrote, and quote, "If congressional Democrats believe in government, they should never vote to fund this one." And the point she was making is that the aims of this, GOP-controlled government are illegitimate and un-American, and that Democrats should make the Republicans' own the horrible outcomes that are sure to happen if we stay shut down for a considerable period of time. She's not denying the importance of health care, ACA subsidies, and so on, but she's arguing that we simply cannot normalize government by coercion and threats to fire thousands of employees or withhold appropriated funds. We basically can't have a legitimate government when the legislative branch cedes its authority to the executive branch. So honestly, I don't know how this ends unless the constituents of Republicans get loud enough to put pressure on them to make them back off from what they're doing.
And that doesn't seem to have happened yet. I think one of the things that she's saying, it seems like to me at least, is that there is perhaps a mileage in letting them have their way and letting them own everything they've done and let people see it and make sure that the Democrats get the word out about what happened and why. And
I think not only do they have to, the constituents and the people have to see it, they have to feel it.
And I think they will feel it.
Everyday lives.
And I think they will feel it.
Yeah.
Another question. We're seeing more and more resistance in Chicago. People are starting to fight back, and they're starting to get really creative in doing it. Do you think that's going to spread to other cities?
I do, and my hope is that it will follow the example set by the protesters in Portland, who are mocking the regime mercilessly by turning out in frog and unicorn costumes. I think satire and mockery are useful tools against humorless authoritarians, but I do, as a caveat, the challenge for demonstrators is to remain more disciplined than federal agents or National Guard troops. We have to protest in numbers that are too big to ignore, but we cannot give the regime a pretext that it's looking for.
The regime seems really afraid of No King's Day. They're getting more hysterical about it. This is Hamas and Antifa and people who hate America. They're trying to paint the demonstrators in a way that Americans, both Democrat and Republican, will look at No King's Day and say these are a bunch of malcontents. And I think that if we get a good turnout on Saturday and it shows that people are united, I think that'll fall on deaf ears. I don't see it happening. What do you think?
I tend to agree with that. I'd really like to see upwards of 10 million out in the streets.
That would be great.
I think that's a number that is too big to ignore. The regime's going to continue to discount it. They're going, like you said, they're going to lump all the demonstrators as communist, Marxist, pro-Hamas, Antifa sympathizers. And at the same time, like I said, they're looking for a pretext to crack down. And I'm sure Stephen Miller is going to be whispering in Trump's ear about, invoking the Insurrection Act. And I don't expect corporate media to give the demonstrations adequate coverage or context.
I agree with you. Last time that happened, they didn't get anywhere near the kind of coverage they should have gotten. There was some, but it was brief snippets.
Yes.
It didn't show the totality of it. And I think that's where they really fell down, and they continue to fall down.
Yeah, and I think too that my hope with after the 18th is that rank and file Republicans in Congress get the message that their constituents are sending to them, that we don't like this, that they don't like ICE in the streets, that they don't like the chaos, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anything resembling a groundswell yet because they're terrified of Trump. But I think at some point they need to be terrified of their own reelections. And I think when that
Yes,
tipping point is reached, we may see some change, but not until then.
right,
It's fine to be afraid of Trump, but if you're not going to get reelected, what does it matter?
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um, let's switch gears and talk about this so-called peace agreement, which seems to be unraveling already. What do you think?
Well, my first reaction was it's smoke and mirrors because there was really nothing underlying it. They didn't get to the root causes of the conflict. Of course, they never do. And Israel still holds all the levels or and levers of authority over the Palestinians, including what comes into the strip in terms of aid, in terms of needed materials. Um, and so the other thing that occurs to me is nobody's talking about the 5 or more years and billions of dollars it's going to take to clear the rubble alone, all the unexploded munitions, the contamination of the soil, and that's got to happen before any life supporting infrastructure can be built. And in the meantime, we're looking at the prospect of tens of thousands of Palestinians living for the next how many years in tent cities. So I mean, the situation there is really dire. It's getting to be colder now, and people have no shelter. So I wasn't particularly optimistic. Trump, of course, took it as a great victory, and I'll give him some credit that they got the bombing to stop. That is a good thing for all concerned. But as always with Trump, he does everything is done so quickly that there's never. It's like the trade deals.
Yeah,
There's nothing underlying them. You're an attorney.
yeah,
You know how a trade deal with another country is a complex
extremely
structure that has to
complex.
be it's got to be worked out over time. Sometimes 2 3 years are required before it they can dot all the i's and cross the
And the
t's.
details have to be
And
done at
Trump
a
doesn't
lower
do.
level.
Yes, and the implementation is what's so critical, and Trump doesn't get to that point because he's like a condo salesman.
Yeah. He basically comes up with one deal and he trumpets it and then he slips to the new one. I mean, he's already off Gaza.
Correct.
He's already off of this.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a one shot deal and he moves on to the next thing. Um,
right.
it's what happens to the people in Gaza is worrying me tremendously because, as you said, with the cold coming and
Hmm.
the lack of shelter and the fact that Gaza is uninhabitable right now. I mean, let's face
Yeah.
facts. It's uninhabitable. The Israelis keep talking about sending the Gazans to Congo.
Hmm.
And this is insane. I mean, it's a tropical
Yes.
area. They're not used to it. They're desert dwellers. There are diseases there they've never been exposed to. I mean, this is a recipe for a catastrophe. And I can't believe the world
Hmm.
would put up with it. But the fact that the Israelis are thinking along these lines scares me. What else
Right.
scares me is the fact that the West Bank isn't being dealt with. There's settler violence every day,
Right.
people beating up and burning down houses and terrorizing West Bank residents. And I don't know how you have a peace agreement where that continues.
Right. And again, the weakness of what was entered into here was the West Bank was not even in the
Yeah.
conversation. But at the same time, neither were the Palestinians. I mean, they're constantly in a position, and I understand that some of this is on them because they don't have a unified political voice. Um, but they're not even at the table, which is amazing. Their fate is being decided for them by others, and this happens continually.
It does. Um, so I fear for the future. I fear for the future, and I fear for the lives of the people of Gaza who are pretty much in exile right now and are going back to a place that most normal people can't live in. Um,
Right.
you've written presciently, sometimes years in advance, from what I've seen about events that happened today. Where do you get your insights? Because they're really great insights.
For me, it starts really with the year 2000 and the election of George W.
Mhm.
Bush, believe it or not, because in my mind, it was always an illegitimate victory. It was decided by the Supreme Court. And that was when I really started to understand that there's something very wrong in our politics. And I began to read quite a bit more widely. And I'm very interested in the workings of power, how how it works, who gets it, who exercises it. And like when the Patriot Act was passed after 9/11, it was clear to me that we were trading our hard-won civil liberties for a false sense of security because the administration had declared war not on an enemy, but on a tactic. And how do you declare war on a tactic and ever win? And nothing that happened after that changed my mind about that. And I feared that when the powers that were enumerated in the Patriot Act and its successor, the USA Freedom Act, which was passed in 2015, could easily be turned against American citizens.
And it
And
has
I
been.
think we're beginning, yeah, and I think we're beginning to see that. And of course, the Patriot Act, in my mind, it's like an original sin because it gave us the Department of Homeland Security, which I always hated that name because it's creepy.
Yes.
It gave us ICE, and it gave us mass surveillance of the public.
And we can thank George W. Bush for that. But Trump has
We
taken
can.
it to a new extreme, and
He
it's
has.
frightening. The fact that people are being prosecuted on flimsy bases is frightening. The fact that grand
Very.
juries are actually giving these indictments is frightening. And as a lawyer, I
Yes.
find what's happened to the rule of law just appalling. Our norms have been violated long ago, but our laws are being
Yeah.
violated right now, and decency is being violated. And I don't know how to stop it.
Yeah, and which leads me to a question I actually wanted to ask you, because I think you and I share, you as a lawyer, have a reverence for the rule of law, which to me is the bedrock of the entire system. If you remove the rule of law, what do we have? Um, but you're also very focused on decency, and as am I. That's what I want in my government. I want them to be decent to people, to the citizens. So when this Trump era ends, and it will end, how would you go about reconstituting the Department of Justice?
Well, you'd have to rip out the roots. You'd have to take out everybody that was put in there. And you'd have to find a creative way to do that where some of them are civil servants. But they have to be gotten out root and branch. You then have to appoint people who really care about the rule of law painstakingly and in large numbers. And it's going to take a lot of volunteers to leave their law practices, to go to the Justice Department, to go and reconstitute it. You're going to need an attorney general who is not Merrick Garland, who's willing and able to go and do what the tough things that need to be done, but at the same time will not take any guff from the president, will not take direction on who to prosecute, but will do it according to what they'd like to say without fear or favor. So I think you need to clean out the people first. And I think that can be done very easily because the political appointees go, and there are a lot of people still there that they haven't gotten rid of that can be kept on. And that I think is the best hope for it. But you need a change in attitude there, and that change in attitude comes with people, and it comes with the president that cares about the rule of law.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's certainly at this time, with the Supreme Court now, looks like they're poised to gut or do away with
Voter.
Section 2 of the Voting Rights
Yep,
Act, that could lead us to single party minority rule.
it could.
It could. But you're a very astute observer of the entire political situation. If you had a magic wand, if someone handed it to you and said, Mark, you can use this wand to reform one or two things about our politics, what things would you choose?
I would reform the campaign finance system immediately, and I would reform the Supreme Court. Those are the two first jobs, 1A and 1B, for any new Congress and president. You need to get rid of Citizens United, and you need to make it bulletproof, and you need to make it bulletproof by getting a real court in. How do you do that? You clean out everybody that's been in there for more than 13 years. Gets rid of Alito and Thomas, and it gets rid of a few of our people too. You then expand the court to 13 members, one for each federal district. And you appoint people who are not hacks, who will rule fairly. And I think you have a fighting chance at that point of getting past Citizens United and coming up with a piece of legislation that the court will endorse. Right now, the court is essentially acting as it's acting as an arbiter of judicial review for Congress, but not for the president. In other words, nothing the president does is subject to judicial review, but everything Congress does is. That has to change. That has to
Right.
change.
Yeah, I think if someone handed me that wand, those would be the things I would also want to remediate. Citizens United, again, we look at George W. Bush. If you want to look at some of the roots, he's who gave us John Roberts.
Mm-hmm. He is.
Roberts gave us, and he gave us Alito too.
Yeah.
Um, and if you look at this court's history, boy, I don't know how you feel, but I think they're going to go down as one of the most reactionary courts in the history of the United States.
They'll go down as one of the most reactionary courts in the history of the United States. We've had bad courts before, but this is a level that we've really seldom achieved. I mean, the courts in the 1850s were terrible. We've had some courts in the 20th century that weren't very good. But this is something new. This is outlaw judicial behavior. They're basically violating the law and violating the Constitution at every turn and coming up with flimsy excuses to support their reasoning. And very frequently, there is no reasoning. There's shadow docket. There are opinions that are put out without a signature, without any details. They're just decisions, and they're done by fiat. And that's just no way to run a country.
Yeah, agreed.
So Mike Johnson has refused to seat Representative Adelita Grijalva, and he won't open the House. So Arizona's suing him. What do you think the Democrats can do beyond that?
Well, I'm not sure what procedural avenues are available to them to get the House open, but every day that Grijalva isn't seated, they should be screaming. Democrats should be screaming about Mike Johnson's flagrant abuse of power and his total disregard for Grijalva's constituents who are not represented in Congress right now because he won't seat her. That's outrageous. That is just an outrageous abuse of power.
It is an outrageous abuse of power, and the excuses he's using are terrible. They're not. They don't pass the lap test. They are consistently, what's the word I'm looking for? Condescending. He made a statement today that he said, bless her heart, she doesn't know, she's a representative elect and doesn't know how things work here. Oh, I didn't think she knows how things work here. Her father was in Congress for a long time. For a long time. So she knows how things work. And she's made the statement again and again and again that she's the 218th vote for the Epstein files release, and that's what Johnson's afraid of. And Johnson, of course, will never admit that. And the question is, how long can he hold out? And I don't know how long he can hold out. He can't hold out indefinitely, because at some point or another there will be an outcry from the public. At least you hope there will.
I hope so, but and it leads me to a question I wanted to ask you as well. So, Mike Johnson gets up in front of the press and he says these things, says it with total conviction. And something I've been thinking about a lot in the Trump era is what happened to the concept of shame as a corrective in our politics. It seems like politicians, particularly on the conservative side, they just don't feel shame anymore.
I think we reached a point in this country, and I think it came around the 90s where a couple of things coincided. Reality television, where people became utterly shameless in their pursuit of fame. Newt Gingrich, who destroyed the dialogue in this country, ripped it root from branch and created an environment of malevolence and hate. And I think the combination of those two things, as well as the fact that the country became very selfish, became very self-centered, became very much focused on celebrity and power, led to people doing things, as I said before, that were, just not terribly decorous. And that's evolved and gotten worse and worse with the internet. And now, we have the ability of people to hide behind a screen and say anything they want, no matter how reprehensible and disgusting. And so with each blow, the tendency toward shame disappears. And now you have a president who's shown people that you can get away with being shameless. And he sets an example for young people, for middle-aged people. I mean, basically, he made racism current again. You cannot be racist because
Yes.
Donald Trump's giving you permission to do it. And so you see these
Yeah.
overt acts and statements that are racist, that are bigoted, that are ethnocentric, and nobody cares. So this has been a steady evolution over the course of several decades, but Donald Trump accelerated it tremendously when he came into the public eye in 2015, and it hasn't gotten any better. I mean, look at the tapes, the
Yeah.
grab 'em tapes. Um,
Yes.
it barely registered. He got elected even after that. What does that tell you about the level of tolerance for shame in this country? Um,
Yeah.
that's just Trump being Trump. Well, that's not acceptable. He's trying to be president of the United States. How on earth is it
Right.
acceptable in any universe?
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing because, as far as I'm concerned, I'm 66 years old and I remember Trump from the 1980s. And although I'm not a native New Yorker, I'm a Californian. I saw Trump as native New Yorkers did, which was as an insufferable blowhard, con artist, and fraud. They had no tolerance for him. And like George W. Bush, Trump was born on third base, but without the self-awareness to see his own privilege. And to me, it's very, very telling that the only thing Trump has ever succeeded at on his own merits was reality TV.
That's true.
Everything else he failed at.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair to Bush, Trump is just far more narcissistic and malevolent, and clearly the sort of person who should never, ever be given power. But I also tend to view Trump through a mob boss lens. I mean, he had ties to Roy Cohn, Russian crime figures dating back to the late 1980s. I think illicit money was laundered through his properties. He loves the tough guy, rhetoric. And I think the only thing he respects is money and power, and
Gangster
very,
administration.
very little
This is
else.
a gangster administration. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree. And for a long time, I've heard analysts describe Russia as a gangster state, and it's very interesting to me that of all um, the world's dictators and authoritarians, his favorite seems to be Vladimir Putin. And Putin operates with near impunity, but he's also a kleptocrat and one of the richest men in the world. Um, I think that is very impressive to Trump.
Oh, I think it impresses him tremendously, and I think he'd like to emulate Putin to the extent that he can, which is why all of these crypto games and everything else he's doing are popping up. But it's just Trump being Trump, and we can't afford Trump being Trump anymore.
I'm still wondering. I don't know if you have this thought, but I'm still wondering what Putin and Trump talked about for 90 minutes in Helsinki in 2018.
I don't know. There's no record of it, is there?
Right, no record. I'm just very, very curious about what these two, one, an actual strongman and one, one who aspired to be. What did they talk about
Marching
without
orders.
advisors?
Marching orders.
I, I wonder. I often wonder if, Putin has been mentoring Trump.
I have a feeling he has, and I think he's been mentoring him with some very gentle persuasion because he has compromise on him. I really believe that. I believe he has something on him. Regardless of what they found with the Steele dossier, I think elements of it are right
Right.
because it fits too well.
Yeah. It's just that I think that we'll have historians and political scientists trying to figure out for the next 25, 30, maybe longer, how it is that the United States fell for this man who has no character in a job where character is really, really important. Um, and that they couldn't see that if you elect a criminal, you have to expect criminality.
Yeah. You wonder how and when people will wake up and realize what they've done. I think a lot of them will never do that because they share Trump's view of the world, and nothing will ever persuade them that he's wrong.
I feel that that's correct. Part of me wishes they would. They should feel the embarrassment, the shame, the responsibility for what they've unleashed on the country, but I don't see it happening.
Neither do I.
People don't like to confront, I think generally speaking, they don't like to confront these kind of things about themselves.
No, they don't. They basically hide behind a veneer of righteousness. I mean, this effort to make America a Christian country is a celebration of their view of righteousness, which is completely out of whack with reality.
Right. And it seems to be out of whack with the good book itself
It
in
is.
many
It is.
in many instances. I honestly don't understand what book they're looking at when they can paint, Jesus, well, he was a strong man and he hated the poor and he loved the rich. You know, that just I don't know how they managed to do that.
I saw an interview once with a woman, and she was confronted by a guy, an interviewer, who kept insisting that what she was saying was completely inimical to the teachings of Jesus. And he used example after example of Jesus' gentleness, turning the other cheek, um, caring for the poor. And she paused and finally said, well, Jesus was a wimp. So that's how far they'll go. I mean, I wouldn't say all of them think that way, but I would believe some of them do.
It's the I mean, when you overlay what we are experiencing politically with the Christian nationalists, yeah, we've just got our work cut out for us. And part of it is the stuff I think that you're doing, almost every single day that I'm trying to do is to get people to realize and sort of wake up to what the reality is that we are facing, because it's very, very serious.
That's one of the reasons I decided to do this podcast, because it gets distributed beyond Substack. I'm trying to give people a view of the other side of the story. And I'm hoping that people, picking this up on YouTube and on Apple and on Spotify will look at it and say, you know what, there's something there. Because I yearn to get beyond the confines of Substack, because I think that we're an echo chamber. I love it.
Yeah.
I love everybody on there, but we're talking to each other.
Yep, we are.
And I think we've got to get beyond that and start talking to other people who are not necessarily MAGA, but who are genuinely confused about the state of this country and want some insight. And I'm hoping that I can get guests on here like you who can give them insight.
Well, I think too is that they need to realize that, people like you, like me, I don't consider us radical
We're
people. I
not.
think pretty, we're Americans. I believe in this country. It's been very good to me. And I've had a lot of opportunity here that I'm sure I wouldn't have had I been born elsewhere. And I want that for other people. But I want decency and I want a government that pays some attention to the people, which right now it doesn't seem to do that
No, it doesn't.
very well.
It
And
doesn't.
so we've got some serious problems in our politics, in our framework, in our founding documents, but that doesn't lead me to want to burn the country down or to hate half of it.
You know,
We can't we can't exist like that where it's red against blue.
I was listening to Kennedy's inaugural address the other day, and Kennedy was by no means a perfect president. He was conservative in many respects, and he missed the boat on a couple of things and finally got to civil rights toward the end of his life. But Kennedy inspired people with a vision,
Yes.
and it was a vision that was a positive vision. It was one that appealed to
Yes.
the better angels of our nature, as Lincoln said. And I yearn for that America.
I wrote a piece called, I think it was From Camelot to Dracula on
Mhm.
Substack, and it was about that very thing. I mean, just comparing Kennedy and Trump in terms of their aspirations. And Kennedy was challenging the nation. Like you said, he was imperfect, but he was challenging us to seek out those better angels, to do amazing things that only this country at that time could do. And I still think we have that ability. That ability hasn't gone away, but it has to be rooted in the rule of law. It's got to be rooted in honesty. Um, and these old sort of things that, like, the philosophers talk about. They're bedrock to me. They're bedrock. You can't have a functioning society unless you recognize some limits. You have morals, um, and so we've those things are some of the things that we've. I'm not. I don't want to know if we. I don't know if we've lost them or we've just forgotten them.
I don't either. I generally don't know whether we've lost them or forgotten them. I'd like to think we've lost them a little bit or forgotten them, but they can come back. with the right leadership. But
Yes.
it's going to take leadership that's willing to go where nobody has gone before, and really appeal to people on a mass scale in a way that skeptical Republicans can look at and say, you know what, this was better than what we had with Trump. I don't know if that'll
Right.
happen, but I'd like to see somebody get elected who would, challenge people again and cause people to kind of throw away their prejudices and their meanness and their hatred and start thinking about building a country again.
One of the things that I'm really very sad about, um, and it's really to me it's come more into crystal form in the last 10 years. It's just the cruelty.
Yeah.
It's just the cruelty for cruelty's sake, as it's and the way Trump uses it is to laugh at people, to mock people, to attack them. That's just beyond the pale to me.
Look at the people around him, Russell Vought and Stephen Miller. They're basically built on a
Yeah,
foundation of abuse and
yeah,
belittling.
Hegseth.
When talking about Kennedy and Johnson, they're working on dismantling everything Kennedy and Johnson did, as well as what FDR did. I mean, they're
Yeah,
trying to break it so it can never be rebuilt again. I don't believe they can succeed in doing that. I think they can be rebuilt again by the right president and the right Congress. I really think so. But I think the backfill that's going to have to be done and the work that's going to have to be done to undo the damage is going to take decades.
me
We've
too.
been
I,
set
I
back
think
badly.
25
I
years.
think a generation is
Yeah,
probably about right. But,
yeah,
let us begin. Um, Last thought, I'm reading a book right now by Andrew Ross Sorkin titled 1929. It's about the origins of the Depression, and it's a really damn good book. I'm part of the way through it right now, and I want to write a book review of it next week. But he's basically, issuing some cautionary notes about the bubble, about speculation,
yes.
and about the things that are happening right now. And I will tell you, I fear for the economy because of everything Trump is doing. And
I do
I
too.
fear that this stock market is completely overvalued and that we're going to have a
Yep.
crash. And it's going to be a disaster for a lot of people in this country. And a lot of those people support Trump.
I couldn't agree more. I'll be honest. I look at the stock market every day. I don't quite understand its ups and downs, its migrations, but it seems it's kind of just logically that it's overvalued. I do think you're right. I think it's going to crash. And like I was saying earlier, people have to feel the impacts of what Trump is doing. And I think if that happens, we're going to feel them in a bad, bad way, in a depression-like scale.
Tragedy that we have to come to that. It's an absolute
Yes,
tragedy that people's lives are going to be upended because of Donald Trump and because nobody believed that Trump could do what he's doing and nobody believed the consequences of what he's doing until they actually hit them in the face. And
yeah,
it's sad.
I couldn't, Well, what's sad too is that the complete capitulation and cowardice of the congressional Republicans, people who take an oath of office to, uphold and defend the Constitution, and they put themselves and their careers and their privilege and their positions ahead of doing what is right for the country. That is also something when we rebuild, we've got to rebuild that idea, the idea of public service. And I'll tell you, a person who embodies that for me is Jack Smith.
Yeah. His interview the other day was terrific.
Yeah, it's very straightforward. He does the right thing for the right reason. He follows the law. He's not afraid, to do that. That's the kind of public servants that, frankly, I expect.
And they exist. They're
When
out
you
there.
take that oath, yeah, when you take that oath, it means something. It has to be more than a suggestion.
On that note, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been an incredible pleasure. It's been a great conversation. I hope people listen in because there's a lot of wisdom here.
Thank you very much, Mark, and I hope you'll keep up the great
I
work.
hope you will too.